He did, and with a passionate intensity that exempted no one. Frankfurter would grab his listener by the upper arm, squeezing hard on the bicep while pressing a point. Argument was his favored, almost constant mode of expression. He argued so well, in fact, that he had finished first in his law school class. That was his entree into the corridors of power. It was the only way a recent immigrant could have been lunching on terms of equality with a Roosevelt. The paths that Roosevelt and Frankfurter had followed to New York legal practice were as divergent as their backgrounds. Roosevelt had experienced a childhood of ease and privilege, spending time in Europe with his family before returning to the United States for his secondary schooling. His college peers liked him. If there was a hint of the spectacular class betrayal that Roosevelt's future held, it was only that he was perceived as trying a bit too hard. Socially prominent freshmen were publicly ranked by a series of elections to something called the Institute of 1770, which chose 100 men in groups of 10, the most clubbable coming first. The lone setback Roosevelt suffered as an undergraduate was not being elected until the 6th group. That signaled he would not be asked to join the Porcellian Club, the pinnacle of college social life, to which Theodore Roosevelt had belonged and which his sons, Theodore Jr. and Kermit, would join a few years later. Roosevelt, who acknowledged the slight as the greatest disappointment in my life, looked for a different venue to distinguish himself. Unable to make the football team, at 6'1" and 146 pounds he was far from solid, he made a run for the presidency of the Harvard Crimson. The membership of the student newspaper was more inclusive than that of the clubs, and it did not hurt that in the fall of his sophomore year, his cousin Theodore became President of the United States. This time Roosevelt was successful. Choosing electoral politics over pure social status had paid off. He returned from summer vacation in 1903 not to go to class, but to lead the Crimson. By coincidence, Frankfurter arrived at law school that same autumn, although the two never met in the year they overlapped in Cambridge. To Roosevelt's Anglo-Saxon contemporaries, prepared by their boarding schools to be leaders of an emerging great power, Harvard was simply the next training ground. Frankfurter, by contrast, found Harvard overwhelming, a land of giants. The first day I went to my classrooms, I had one of the most intense frights of my life. I looked about me. Everybody was taller. Frankfurter stood just about 5 feet 5 inches tall. But his worry about stature was as much social as literal. He had been born in the Vienna of the late Austro-Hungarian Empire, the magical city that produced Freud, Wittgenstein, and Mahler. Yet Frankfurter's small bourgeois family had little connection to the great world of Viennese arts and letters, which might be why Vienna almost never figured in Frankfurter's later reminiscences of his boyhood. Frankfurter's most accomplished relative was his uncle Solomon, a scholar who eventually became director of the State Library in Vienna. There were rabbis in the family's history, though nearly every European Jew could say as much. On arrival, the Frankfurters had settled in the Lower East Side of New York, in a German and Yiddish-speaking part of the neighborhood that real estate agents would later rename the East Village. Frankfurter's pleasant and rather ineffectual father sold linens, silks, and furs, sometimes out of their apartment, sometimes door to door, and never to much profit. Money was scarce. Frankfurter attended PS 25, and when he was offered only a half scholarship to the Horace Mann School, $100 of the $200 tuition, he went instead to the College of the City of New York, which offered a combined high school and college degree. City College was already a hotbed of ambitious and brilliant young Jewish students. Frankfurter enjoyed his classes and was an active and successful debater. The fervid atmosphere of intellectualism and leftism engaged him without overwhelming him. "I'd sit hours and hours in East Side tea shops," Frankfurter later recalled. Together he and his friends would drink highball glasses of tea with some rum in it, or lemon and a piece of cake, and jaw into the morning about everything under the sun. Frankfurter read widely, browsing across a broad range of subjects and educating himself through the resources of the college and New York City's extraordinary public libraries. While Roosevelt was averaging a gentleman's C at Harvard, Frankfurter finished third in his class at City College and left college, like Roosevelt, with a vague plan of becoming a lawyer. An obsessive newspaper reader interested in politics and public affairs, Frankfurter did not yet aspire to an active role on the American stage. As a recent immigrant, it would have